Good morning, girls.
Morning.
Heavy Unit 1 returned from workshops.
Send up the docket.
Yes.
Send it up to local, will you?
She looks all right.
Fire station. Heavy Unit P231, returned from workshops. Okay?
Eileen, will you make out a disc for Barrett?
Is that new chap? Yes, Blue Watch. Okay.
Sub said Barrett to ride heavy number 1.
Well, the crazy gang is going to hope.
That's Sub, Johnny, Waters, Jacko, Colonel, B.A., Valance, and Barrett.
Blimey, he said, when I get out of this, he's going to join the fire brigade.
Did he?
No, that's the funny part of it. About a fortnight ago, the police. Come on, my son, let's see what you can do this time. Sorry, then, well, now I've got 4 in each at the ring.
Johnny! Johnny!
What? Oh,
Come on! You'll be late!
sorry then, old man. What's the matter? I'll have to see my manager about you. Can't stand a lot of that. Come on.
Hiya, Joe!
Hello, man. Hi. Oh, very well, thanks.
Lovely.
Have a nice evening. Well, you know, carry on a stick. Go on. Walk over.
Hello, Ducks.
Goodbye, my dear. Don't do nothing silly, will you, Sid?
Cheer up.
Can you tell me where ornaments will be, mate, please? Just over there, Manu. Thank you.
Morning, Colonel. Morning's up.
What not?
Oh, not so bad. Tip us for breakfast tomorrow, Charlie.
Morning, girls.
Morning, Sub.
Morning, Charlie. Morning, morning, boys. Morning, George.
Morning.
Wait. Hey!
You get it?
Yeah. Morning, sir. Morning, girls.
Morning, sir. Morning, Mr. T. Morning, Annie. Got the roll call book. Sure.
And next question.
That's quite like old times, isn't it?
Yeah, the old man will be pleased.
We're riding, Titch.
Can't see. Get a crack in there, Johnny boy. She's back again.
It's about time, too.
Who's Barrett?
New bloke from training school. Full of chaps.
Excuse me. Could you tell me where the fire station is?
Yes.
14Y.
Putting right on 3 corner, yeah?
Uh-huh. Thank you very much.
Morning, Mrs. Townsend. Morning, Eileen.
Morning, Betsy. There's 2 heavy units and 2 TPs on the run now.
2 heavy units and 2 TPs, so the heavy unit's back, is it?
Yes.
Trying to dig up this morning, John.
Go on.
I was sitting by the fire, dozing. A big lump of coal fell out. Right under the rug, caught it a fire.
Go on.
Give me quite a turn.
Yeah, doing it all wrong, Jimmy, having a fire in your own home.
You got something there? Yeah. Where should we have it, John? On the top or on the deck?
You better put it on the deck behind.
Okay.
We'll start it later on.
Oh, well. It's all right for you, you know. You're going off. I'm coming on.
Looks a bit different with a bit of paint on, Johnny. Yes, it does go, doesn't it?
There's something in that. If I had the time...
All right. Me and you, Jack. We'll go and get the long ladder now. Come on,
Well, we put the ball ready for the locker, John.
Cheerio, Charlie. Be in the limelight tonight. Full moon. Might be handy.
The sporting wife, please.
Yes.
Can you tell me where the watchman is?
Yeah, straight up there, not the
Staircase.
Thank you.
Well, cheerio, Charlie. Cheerio, George.
The name's Barrett.
Sab, here's Barrett.
Sorry I'm a bit late, but they kept me at 14.
You found us all right, then?
Yes, thank you, sir.
Johnny!
Oh, me?
Yeah, shoot, come up here a minute.
We're in trouble again, Colonel. That's what comes with working under this window. Working party round this morning in Cocker. Everyone! Dock Street! Flooded sewer.
Where's he going to sleep?
Well, there's a spare bed in the monkey house. You better put him in there.
What do you want, Sab?
Oh, Johnny, this is Barrett. Barrett, that's Johnny Daniels, driver of the heavy unit.
Pleased to meet you, mate.
How do you do?
How are you?
Now, listen, I want you to take him over to the monkey house, let him stow his gear,
Yeah.
and show him round, and unload him on them geezers outside, will you?
Right, Sab. Right, Barrett, come this way, will you, boy?
We mustn't work too hard, my friends. We've got to make this last till 1 o'clock.
I beg your pardon.
Come on, lads, get cracking with that pump.
Okay, Skipper.
We better meet the boys. This is Joe Valance. And the fella down there is B.A. Brown. He'll show you a pair of braces in a minute if you're not careful. And that old bagpipe over the back there is Rumbold. And this is our little ray of sunshine, Jacko. Boys, this is Barrett.
Another one for the poker school, Joe.
Yeah. Oh, sweet mystery of love and life, I found you. La da da la da la la da da da. Left, Colonel. Right up. Oh, sweet mystery of life, at last I found you. That's right. Bit to you. That's it. I would like to be beside the seaside. I would like to be beside the sea.
Johnny, have you got everything on board you ought to have?
Yes, I think so, Well.
Well, thank goodness. That's something anyway.
I would like to stroll upon the prom, with the brass band playing tiddly hum.
Get to the return of appliances, will you?
Right station. 2 heavy units and 2 TPs.
Thank you.
2 heavies, 2 TPs, sub.
Control here. Can I have your return of appliances, please? 1 heavy unit, 3 trailer pumps, and 1 heavy unit off the run shortage of riders. Thank you. B station, sub. 1 heavy unit, 3 trailer pumps, and 1 heavy unit off the run shortage of riders.
Right.
Can I have return of your appliances, please? 2 heavy units, 1 water unit, 1 ramp lorry. Thank you.
Control here. Can I have the return of your appliances, please? 2 heavy units and 2 TPs. Thank you.
Control here. May I have your return of appliances, please? 2 heavy units, 2 trailer pumps, 1 ECU.
W station, sub. 2 heavy units,
2 trailer pumps, 1 ECU.
Return of appliances for today. 26 pumps, 1 turntable ladder, 1 escape carrier unit, 1 water unit, 1 ramp lorry.
Right, fall in, lads. Right, hook ladder drill. First man, up you go. Loading 6 round. Lay back in your arms, man. Keep your legs straight. Why don't you let her swing like that? Up again. Come on, man, it's not a funeral.
I would proceed with caution downstream, keeping to the channels of the river. On nearing the shore, I would station a man forward of the boat to take soundings. On being satisfied there was sufficient water under the boat to remain afloat for an indefinite period, I would moor up forward to a buoy, send a line ashore from the stern, or drop my kedge anchor.
Listen, Papa George, come here to give me your breakfast and all something. No, John, don't eat patience.
Two bob? Oh, give it. Come on.
How's it going? All right? Come on. Shall I get in? It's not a bad place, is it? All right. Nice station, isn't it?
Yes, it's a Johnny, when you go to the local this afternoon, I want you to take Barrett with you and show him the station's ground.
Okay, sir. Yeah, that'll be all right. Yeah, that'll be all right. Yeah. Borders? What's the matter with the sub this morning? Looks a bit dodgy, doesn't he? It's a full moon. Yeah.
Ground and show it off. Yeah. Put your test mask underneath there, that'll be all right. Yeah, I used to drive one of these, you know, before
Did
the
you?
war. Yeah. You want to be careful around here, though, with a cage, huh?
Yeah?
Oh, it's double dodgy around here. But I had 5 seamen one night out the city.
Yeah?
Oh, they was tight as ticks. I took them down the docks and had to wheel them up the gangway and laid them out on the deck like peas in a pod. What did you do before the war?
I used to write advertising and things like that.
Well, it's schoolgirl complexion stuff, I suppose.
Well, more like liver balm.
Liver balm? You want to lay all that stuff on me, I'm telling you. You'll be all right reporting my station as long as you use your load. There she is, Bill. High tide. You know, it's a funny thing about these riverside fires. When it comes to it, there's never enough water. Where are we now? Well, that's Trinidad Street down there, Bill, just inside the station's ground. And down here's Alderman's Wharf. Yeah, we'll take a look at the boats while we're down here. They get some pretty big stuff in here now and again, you know, yeah. And see a smasher cock, eh?
There you go, Bill.
All right, sir.
Well, I think by going on to 7 tonight, 8 in the morning, this will be away all right.
Some barge down there. Holds about 10,000 gallons.
As much as that.
Yeah. Pretty useful in a pinch, you know. They're supposed to be asleep in here. Woo! What a smashing shot. What a peacock.
Say, what is this? What do you figure it is, an incinerator over here? Can't have 5 minutes sleep without you batting in.
Hey, Jacko, what about a cup of tea? Yeah, what about getting that old samovar of yours going?
Okay. You didn't ought to do that, you know. It's dangerous, breaking a man out like that. How do you know I wasn't doing about Ginger Rogers?
Hey, who's supposed to be on the gate?
Not me. You've been titivating that axe up a long time, haven't you, Dickie?
We must make a show now and again, you know, Johnny.
Yeah, remember that time when Jacko had his axe handle painted black and he got told off by the super at the fire?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Brigade. Chief Officer, one minute, please.
Have your signature on those, please, sir?
Hello, OC speaking. Right. That was Home Office Fire Control. They'll be raiding tonight.
All right, give us that finishing rod.
Elsie, have a cup of tea, please.
You old Martinos, Park Hole's water.
When you've done that, Sub, what about a match?
All right, Colonel, off the shot.
Right.
Wicked. Well, Phil, this is the rack.
Bars up, gents, please.
Good. Got any fags else?
What do you have to drink, Wolf?
One, please, Joe. Two Wolf, mate.
Now, this is a very delicate problem.
Make your mind up, then.
Calls for the scientific approach.
Tom's drink, Phil.
Yes.
What do you have?
Like a bitter, I think.
Bitter?
Yeah.
Don't have any bitter. No. We'll have some mild. Have
Just a
some
quick
mild.
one, Jock.
All right?
Sitting down, Barrett?
Yes, thanks very much.
You'll be all right.
Who's buying the beer? Tap the ball. Give us a couple on the sled, Jock. They're all skint round here.
Shall we have a basin of this, Joe?
Yes, all right. Well, I'll play you who pays for the beer.
Okay. Well, cheers, boys.
Cheers.
Yeah. Cheers, Johnny.
Cheers, Jacko.
Cheers.
Good right. Size, big shot.
Yours, double. Now, how to give it a start, Wolf?
How do you fix the braces, boy?
Well, braces, I got a belt the other day.
Oh, Ah, but in this gaff you need belt and braces. And what's a pair?
What's your foot here?
What's it to you?
After the old game again, IBA. Listen, Bill, I bought these pair of braces over a fortnight ago. And all they're good for is hanging yourself.
Oh, see, let's have some supper first.
You'll get some supper. Clear away them tea things first.
OP control. 36 OP. Wind from northwest to southeast, blowing strongly across the river. Right, thank you.
Thank you. Well, I know why you fellas get 3 pairs of trousers and we only get 1. You have to do such a lot of sitting around.
You play one of these, Bill?
A little bit.
Oh, what about tickling up the old ivories then?
All right.
What is it? Classic or jazz?
Well, lads, get your gear on.
Aye, sir.
What's it like out, Jacko?
Smashing moon.
Ah, that'll be us then.
Yeah, all right.
Are them Hunnigan lamps in working order?
Quite okay.
Have to hold the fort yourself tonight, you know.
One man went to mow, he went to mow one meadow, one man and his dog went to mow a meadow. Mr. Clerk. 2 men went to mow, they went to mow a meadow. 2 men, 1 man and his dog went to mow a meadow. Water's coming in now. 3 men went to mow, they went to mow a meadow. 3 men, 2 men, 1 man and his dog went to mow a meadow. Here's Jacko. 4 men went to mow, they went to mow a meadow. 4 men, 3 men, 2 men, 1 man and his dog went to mow a meadow. Joe Valance. 5 men went to mow, went to mow a meadow. 5 men, 4 men, 3 men, 2 men, 1 man and his dog went to mow a meadow. It's B.I. Make it snappy. 6 men went to mow, went to mow a meadow. 6 men, 5 men, 4 men, 3 men, 2 men, 1 man and his dog went to mow That's you. You're riding with us tonight.
Just and mighty death, whom none could advise, thou hast persuaded. What none hath dared, thou hast done. And whom all the world hath flattered, thou only hast cast out of the world and despised. Thou hast drawn together all the far-stretched greatness, all the pride, cruelty, and ambition of man, and covered it all over with these two narrow words, Hic Jacet.
Righto, Colonel. We'll set that to music when we come back.
Enjoy your 4 days. Yes, thank you. OP control, 36 OP. Incendiary bombs falling between 145 degrees and 180 degrees, about 3/4 of a mile. Thank you.
Right, notify anti-aircraft.
Egg.
Incendiary bombs, GD-39.
Incendiary bombs, GD-39.
Control. Right. Fire at Dock Street, sub.
Right. And send a TP from Y.
Control. Right. Swan Lane.
Well then, right. Send the second TP from Y.
Swan Lane. TP2. TP2 to Swan Lane.
I don't want them any nearer than that. But of course they're cover now.
Trinidad Street, heavy number 1. Heavy unit 1 to Trinidad Street.
Oh, now you catch us. Come on, Bill. Where you go, my buck?
Come on, Colonel, he's got me over.
Yes, sub. I was down here this afternoon with the Rocky. Yeah, okay. And with me Barra and me vocal days, Cardiff, me green suppers. Now fine cauliflowers, you can't beat us. You can hear me shout all arty, curry little greens, long French beans, but all nice and brown. Now if you boil it for an hour, they're like a bowl of flour, and the rhubarb is the best in all the town.
Okay, Club.
Hydrant here!
Go on here. That ain't a bleeding hydrant, it's a sewer. You'll have the rats after us. Okay, my cocker. Come on!
Whoa! Lord blimey, that wall looks a bit dodgy. Hope when it goes the right way. Yeah, me too.
This way.
You want 3 lengths? Okay, right, straight out, B8. Well, take it up to where he gets to, couple it up and roll it up back here, will you?
Right.
Up top!
Blimey, what are they like? That's nothing, Jacko. Once they get across this river here with the wind. Now look, Rappo. Secure that branch to this bar, see if we can get it up. I'll get back to the message now. I'll go back as soon as I can. You hold on to that, Dan.
Up top! Where's that line?
Stand clear below!
Okay. Where the hell are you? Up top.
Well, stick around and deal with this, then.
2.5 inches. And a clove hitch. Okay, take it away.
Take it away.
Away!
Hello? Hello? Is that 14 local? Is that 14 local speaking? It's the suburbs of Dyke speaking from Trinidad Street. Now take this message. Make the pumps up to 10. That's right. Now don't go away. Additional message. I say additional message. Now order a fireboat to Alderman's Wharf. That's right. Explosives involved at the fire. All right, mate, drop it. Now listen, I want you to stand down here. Johnny, give my hand down here. All right, Johnny? Another length of hose over that wall. Take the ladder and the rest of the crew and get your branch in as far as possible.
Okay, Snap.
Now come on, lads, get to work.
Will you run it out, fellas? One, right. Yeah. B.A. short ladder. Okay, well, I'll go and see what it looks like.
Yep.
It doesn't go anywhere. We'll have to go to the top.
Oh, right up. B.A.!
Okay, Joe.
What a windy lot of bastards we are. That was half a mile away.
Half a mile in front.
Everybody was too close for me.
You're telling me.
We want another length.
Right up.
If this is the right way up.
Sir, message from Trinidad Street. Make pumps up to 10. Additional message, order fireboat to Alderman's Wharf. Explosives involved at the fire. Danger of spreading to supply ship.
10, he's got to help. We're sending 5 to get on with anyhow.
Send a TP from V, a TP from W, send a heavy and a TP from X,
Order a trailer pump.
and a TP from Z. Get
Trinidad
District Officer
Street.
Blythe to go on, will you?
Order 1 TP to Trinidad Street.
Control here. Order your heavy unit and trailer pump to Trinidad Street.
Control here. Order your TP to Trinidad Street.
Haven't you got any water yet?
Not yet.
What about that water below? Here she comes.
All right, up top, Wall?
Yeah, we got a roof up here.
Okay. Up you go, Johnny. Got the branch on the top there.
No. Got it right? No, not there. Put it down in the seat of it there. That's it, get out of it. Okay.
Johnny, water. Okay, Walt. 100 back. Show yard.
Go, boy. Right in the corner, Joe.
Switchboard. Start again.
Number 14's fireboat out to Alderman's Wharf. We got anything in for Alderman's Wharf?
One quite close at Trinidad Street.
Oh, that must be the same then. It's low tide too, they're going to have a devil of a job.
Can you give us a bit more on this one?
No, I can't give you any more.
Not £20?
No, I can't give you anything at all. There's not enough here. Look, Barrett, I'll tell you what to do. While you're hanging about, you better go down the road and see where the nearest open water supply is. Yeah.
All right.
That's favourite.
What do you think that is?
That looks like Trinidad Street.
What the hell? Johnny! What's the matter with this water?
Johnny! She's finished!
Must have been that formula.
Well, I don't think so.
That fire seems to be getting worse. You better give him another ring, Tom.
OP control? 36 OP? Yes? Yes. Thank you. Fire at 150 degrees and increasing rapidly.
Right, notifying the aircraft again.
Echo. Fire at GD 39, increasing rapidly.
All this lot's getting away now because you're not going to jet of water, you see. Look at it, there, why don't you?
Sorry, I don't know.
Well, that mobile down's on this one.
Control?
I'm sorry, I can't help you.
What was that?
Awfully bad line. Can you shout about it?
What?
No, I can't hear you twice.
Oh, yes.
Oh, hello? I guess you can give another demo.
Right. Sir? Sir?
Yes.
Zed's number 1 heavy unit out to Ship Alley.
All right. Hello. Try again, will you?
We're down for 4, sir.
All right.
Johnny! What's the matter with this water? I found some. That sunk barge was all this afternoon up the cut. Oh, that's it. go down the road there and stop those pumps and tell them to relay the water onto us.
Right.
Can't go down that way, sir. There's no water down there. The mains are broken. We got a branch on the roof. We had to pack up unless we get water. I found a sunk barge in a cut down there. Can relay it down to our heavy.
First on the left?
Yes, along that alley.
Come on, sir. Take your first two appliances, first turning on the left, and get to work. Okay. Relay water.
Are you the officer in charge?
Just a minute, please. Go back and order on a turntable ladder. Once to this one.
Well alive. What can you do for us?
I've got some more appliances coming on shortly. Don't worry.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, 14 control here. We have 4 pumps available. Standbys are urgently required. Right? Yes. So that's right. TTL set. Will you hold on? Standby. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Control. Control. Oh, yes, I'm sorry for the interruption. We have another message for you. Our TTL is out for Trinidad Street. Out to where? Trinidad Street. Right, thank you.
That's not so good, is it? Go round the district, check pumps available.
What room? 62, please.
What's room 66, please?
Or to see district control. Here, can I have your pumps available, please?
14. How many pumps available? Only 4. What room? Can you hear me? 28. Checking your pumps available.
10 pumps, thank you.
10, thank you.
10 pumps available.
Give me your pumps available, please. 66. New. 10.
Thank you. 28. Nil. 88. Nil.
tub. Only 66 pumps available.
Right, get on to brigade control. Call still being received. Further help required. Pumps available, 66.
Brigade control. C. Charlie, district control.
Further help required. Pumps available, 66. 66. Right.
Joan, oh, there you are.
There's nothing in D. 5 GPs in E.
C district, 66 pumps available. Further help required. Nothing in B, nothing in A. Message to fire control. Reinforcements, 100 pumps required.
Well, how are you getting on?
Well, the C district is rather concentrated fire attacks, sir. I've after 100 pumps in fire control.
Anybody shaky?
Definitely the C district, sir. They're very much stressed.
Right, well, I'll go and have a look round, and I'll let you know. Carry on.
Very good, sir.
All right, Barrett, where you been? Oh, all over the place. What's it like here, eh? Not so clever. There's gonna be some trouble later on. I'm not a kid. Now, Colonel, you get down below and tell the officer in charge that things are coming out of hand. You got it? Now, go on, get down as quick as you can. The reel on this, John.
Things are getting very difficult. He wants assistance as soon as possible.
Quiet. Up top! Up top! Double the white lad. Tell them to come down at once. We've got a turntable ladder coming along. Right, sir.
District officer says you've got to get off the roof. How the hell do you think they're going to get down there? I don't know how the hell I get up.
Get him out of the float there! go back after him.
Yes, he's right down, sir. He's all right. It's the other one we're worried about.
Blimey, look at that wall, Beefy! Knock out! Shut up, Gunny! All right!
Brigade Control. A message from Fire Control. Reinforcements. 100 pumps have been ordered from Abbotston to stand by in your area. Thank you. June! June!
No, that should be 3 heavy units, not 2 then. So 2 others later on the day.
Footing control. Oh, they're on their way, are they? Right. Sub,
Yes.
those standbys are on their way in now.
Well, that's something, anyhow. Is this 14 line?
Yes.
Oh, where the hell was your finding this place? We come from Abbotston. We're sent by your control to stand by here.
Abbotston?
Yes, the other side of Colford.
Why, that's 60 miles away.
Don't I know it? You people seem to have a regular patient down here tonight.
Yes, our boys at the docks.
36 OP. Thompson speaking.
36 OP? Yes. Fire at 150 degrees appears to be under control. Thank you.
Thank goodness for that.
Can't you take your chum?
You heard?
No, what? Jekyll's copped it. Copped it, babe? He's copped it, I tell you.
Thanks for that. Well, night, eh?
Nice to go with you. You're right. All right for you.
Let's go see you, eh, boys?
Bless you, my beautiful.
You look pretty beautiful yourself too, mate.
Who's got in charge, John?
I'm in charge, sub. Our sub-officer's injured.
Oh, well, knock off and make up and get off home, all
Yes,
right?
sir. Yes, sir.
Johnny! Knock off and make up! Okay, well. Make up, yeah. Johnny. Had a bad night.
Bad night? You want to go down the road and have a look over the wall. The boat down there, good as new. She ain't got a scratch on her. It's a sight for sore eyes.
Hey, Doctor. Yeah, we left you up there. Still there? Right. Yeah, she's still afloat, all right.
So far received, it does not appear that casualties are likely to be heavy. In one district, the attack became concentrated and several large fires were started. These, however, were successfully prevented from spreading. Agency reports say that...
No, we weren't hit. She'll make it all right. She'll be there on time.
Aye, in the catalogue you go for men. As hounds and greyhounds, mongrels, spaniels, cubs, shocks, water rugs and demi-woos, and kleps, all by the name of dogs. Valued file distinguishes the swift, the slow, the subtle.
Take your wet clothes off, Bill.
The housekeeper,
Thanks, Mum.
the hunter.
That's a good boy.
Every one, according to the gifts which bounteous nature hath in him closed.
Good luck, mate.
Thanks.
Hello, Townie. I never expected to see you anymore.
Come on, chum, snap out of it.
1935, Britain was at peace. But people remembered the last war and hoped it wouldn't happen again. But there was war in Asia. Just an item on the newsreels to most of us, though. It couldn't happen here. But in Europe, fascism was already on the march. 1936, the Nazis reoccupied the Rhineland, and war with Germany became quite a possibility. So Britain prepared fighter planes, balloon barrage, searchlights, ack-ack gun sights. Britain needed air raid precautions as well. A whole army of civil defense workers, ambulance crews, air raid wardens, first aid and rescue parties, everything ready for the battle that could happen here and probably would.
We expected that this would be one of the enemy's main weapons, the 1 kilo incendiary bomb. We had over 1,000 fire brigades throughout the country. It was their job to fight peacetime fires. But if this little bomb were dropped in tens of thousands on our town, as it might well be, the regular brigades, efficient as they were, would not be able to deal with the fire. They had courage, training, equipment, but not the numbers. For war emergency purposes, the regular brigades had to be heavily reinforced by volunteers. In Whitehall, instructions were prepared and issued to local authorities. An appeal was launched throughout England, Scotland and Wales for volunteers to form an auxiliary fire service, and the national campaign was strengthened by local recruiting drives. We needed women, too, as in the other defense services, and the first recruits were sent out with the job of bringing in more volunteers to swell the ranks of the new auxiliary fire service.
I volunteered in those early days. We held parades, gave displays to make ourselves known. And in London, they put us in the Lord Mayor's show, alongside the fighting services. It wasn't all parades, though. New recruits like me had to be trained. We weren't paid, mind you, and we had to do it in our spare time. But we came along in the evenings or at weekends from offices, shops, factories to learn the job. Pump operation, the handling of branches and jets. The regulars taught us the tricks of the trade. We had classroom instruction and practical exercises to get to know our equipment. Hook ladder drill too. It was tough, but we needed it to make us fit.
The training given to recruits at the headquarters of the London Fire Brigade was typical of the work that went on all over the country during 1938 and 1939 with ever-increasing urgency. Women were particularly trained for watchroom and control room duty, thereby releasing able-bodied men for firefighting. Trained and ready if need be, the auxiliary fire service paraded. While they waited, they took every opportunity of attending fire calls with the regular brigade. It was valuable experience for them. But to fight fires, you need equipment as well as men. And the government ordered the mass production of standardized appliances, chief among them the trailer pump and the self-propelled heavy unit, a utility model of the traditional red fire engine. Miles more hose was needed too, more than Britain could supply. The gap was filled by imports from Canada and the United States.
Meanwhile, Nazi Germany was preparing to march again. Hitler had taken Czechoslovakia. August 1939, the Danzig question. Tension grew. War could happen. It was going to happen. On September 1st, Germany invaded Poland.
That same day, the standby telegram went out. The AFS was mobilized.
That night, like thousands of others, I left my civvy job and became a fireman for the Duresh. And the next 2 days, well, the only word is hectic. The plan went into operation. Schools and garages one day were emergency fire stations the next. And we'd earmarked transport for the AFS too. Funny to see taxis, private cars, even tradesmen's vans towing those trailer pumps of ours.
On rivers and waterways, emergency fireboats were got ready. Canal barges were adapted for service on inland water. Many different craft were fitted with pumps, ready to protect vital warehouses and ships in dock areas. After the months of careful preparation, mobilization went forward quickly and efficiently.
On September 3rd, 1939, the ultimatum to Germany expired, and the nation heard Mr. Chamberlain say,
I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
You remember that first winter of the war? Nothing happened. They called it the phony war. We went on training hard. The war wouldn't be phony forever. The women settled down to their new jobs or did the same old jobs in new surroundings. For us firemen, there was servicing, maintenance, cleaning, and spit and polish, a lot of that too. We auxiliaries wanted to be as smart as the regulars, and I think we were too. And particularly smart on the day His Majesty inspected us at the headquarters of the London Fire Brigade. It was a long, cold winter, and still nothing happened. Sometimes we could warm ourselves at a fire, though. Regulars and auxiliaries would turn out together, and we new chaps, well, we learned a lot from it. But it still wasn't the job we'd joined up to do. Suddenly, in the spring, it happened.
Happened very quickly. The German breakthrough on the Western Front. As a footnote to history, we record that the London fireboat, Passy Shaw, was one of the little ships that helped to bring our army back from the beaches. Now, Britain stood alone. After the months of waiting, now was the time. Now the war was to be in the British sky and on British soil. The heroic few of Fighter Command again and again broke up the mass attacks of the Luftwaffe, but some reached their target. They struck first at the precious oil supplies, the Pembroke Dock oil storage. It gave the wartime fire service its first real test. The burning oil containers gave off billowing clouds of acrid smoke. The spectacle was tremendous and terrifying. Firemen from all over South Wales, from Birmingham, Gloucester and Bristol, attempted to deal with the blaze. But it was more than a blaze or a fire, it was a conflagration. Immense quantities of water were pumped from the sea to make foam. For 16 days and nights, over 300 men from 20 brigades continued the fight, though more than once the planes came back and bombed them again, killing some firemen, wounding others. In the end, the firemen beat the fire and succeeded in saving 10 out of the 17 tanks. The enemy struck again at Thameshaven on the Essex shore of London's river. The blazing oil lit up the night sky for miles around. Brigades from the whole of Essex and London were reinforced from as far afield as Derby and Nottingham. Fires burned for 14 days and nights. They left behind a wilderness of battered and mangled containers. The enemy had struck hard. Soon the Germans changed their policy and their target. The bombers were switched from isolated military targets to concentrate on London. September 7th, 1940, the first fires were started in the congested dock areas. The Luftwaffe, driven from the daytime skies by the RAF, came back that night and every night.
Were you in London when those night raids were on? I'll never forget that time. First, it was the docks. Then they stopped being so duty. I've never seen anything like it. And work. Sometimes we went for nights on end without sleep. And not long before, we'd been complaining because there was nothing to do. London's burning, London's burning. It was just a kid's song in the old days. And we were there to stop it burning down. Not just the firemen of London, but fellows called in from Manchester, Birmingham, and all dozens of other places. After 2 months of it, one night in November, we heard the planes as usual, but they didn't come to us.
The attack was switched again, and the enemy began a series of concentrated attacks on provincial centers of war industry and shipping. All through the winter of 1940-41, the raids went on. HE bombs, parachute mines, oil bombs, and always incendiary bombs. The immediate damage was great, and behind them, the raiders left vast areas of spreading fire. No fire service in the world had ever yet had to handle anything like this. The firemen needed all their training and all their courage too. In the control rooms, the women auxiliaries strove to meet the demands for reinforcements, reliefs, by calling on brigades from cities, towns and villages that were not being attacked on that particular night. Morning after morning, the reliefs came in to towns that looked like this, to help deal with the fires that were still burning, and to wait for the same again at dusk.
London didn't have much of a rest. December the 29th it was, Saturday night of all nights, and they went for the city. They didn't burn St. Paul's, but it wasn't for want of trying.
The damage done that night was so extensive and so rapid that the government made compulsory fire watching in general. The employees of every factory, office and shop, and the residents of every street in target areas were enrolled in the fire guard. They were the new first line of defense against the incendiary bomb.
Spring 1941. Spring at last. No slackening in the raid. Some of the worst came in April and May, and the fire watchers proved their value. 6 months of blitz. 6 months of fire raising. Fire was the enemy's biggest weapon. The firefighters were among our chief defenders. They were the front-line soldiers of those days. The firemen's courage and endurance were beyond all praise. But courage and endurance were not enough. Listen to what the Home Secretary, Mr. Herbert Morrison, said in May 1941.
The real weakness of our present arrangements is the many small units of administration. Even quite small operations may involve 20 or 30 separate local authorities and chiefs of fire brigades. The remedy is the transfer to the state of the administration and control of the fire-fighting services.
So Parliament placed on the statute book an act to provide for the reorganization and improvement of the fire services of Great Britain. All the fire brigades of England, Scotland and Wales were now merged into the new single organization. Regulars and auxiliaries, men and women, paid and unpaid alike, became members of this body. At a special ceremony in London, the counterpart of many other ceremonies elsewhere, the LCC handed over to the Home Secretary the brigade that had stood up to the Blitz. Mr. Morrison came in person to accept the responsibility for the future management of the service. It was the youngest service of the Crown, but it had behind it the fine traditions of the local brigade, and it had resources in men and equipment which individually those brigades could never command. The outward symbols of the great administrative change were the flag for the new service and the badge modeled on the badge made famous by the AFS. A unified chain of command was set up. In each of the civil defense regions in England and Wales, the regional commissioner took charge of the firefighting resources. A chief regional fire officer was appointed to his staff. The local brigades were reorganized into fire forces. At each level, officers with appropriate staffs took command. Fire force commanders and their assistants, divisional officers and column officers, senior company and company officers. Women officers took their place beside them. Area officers and their assistants, group officers and assistant group officers. A new system of control was established radiating from the Home Office Fire Control Room, which was part of the great Home Security War Room in London. By this centralized control, the firefighting resources of the country could be concentrated in one spot or deployed to the best advantage over areas that were being simultaneously attacked. The movement of a disc or tally on the map meant action many miles away as a convoy set out to help a hard-pressed area. The young service required all-round improvements in technical standards. The Home Office and the Scottish Office issued instructions and advice, keeping all firemen informed of the latest developments in enemy tactics and in the technique of wartime firefighting. As part of a long-term policy, work was started on a comprehensive manual of firemanship. A standard drill book was issued immediately to ensure that all units were trained on the same lines. Teams from the departmental inspectorates traveled the country to raise the standard of efficiency.
A big innovation was a college for officers at Saltdean near Brighton. It was the first time that any uniformed service had set up a co-educational establishment. I was one of the instructors there. We had an urgent job on, to train men to be first-class officers, and under our first commandant, we tackled the job with enthusiasm. Potential officers were treated as officers. Each one had his own private room. There was a very good bar and common room to spend your evenings in. And for study or relaxation, there was the quiet atmosphere of the library. We had courses for women as well as men, and the college vestibule was a busy place as students hurried to their classes. In the laboratory, we taught them the chemistry of fire. We had a magnificent model town to teach the tactics of firefighting, all sorts of different situations and how you go about them. There were classroom discussions on the practical problems that might confront officers on the fire ground. And we had detailed scale models, too, of particular buildings to illustrate fire protection as well as fire extinction, like this model cinema. We gave instruction in the use of breathing apparatus, hard work that, and all the equipment they and their men would have to use. And when the weather was hot, we varied the routine a bit. On the women's side, their officers were taught all the jobs that fire women would have to do under their supervision, especially mobilizing and control room work. The women officers had to learn, too, things like leadership, discipline, and welfare. The college set out to establish a high standard for officers in the service, and that is what it did. But the training of the firemen themselves was equally important. The new fire forces set up residential training schools. Parade ground smartness was essential for discipline in action. Refresher courses were held for serving firemen. New recruits were given basic training. Skilled drivers were trained. Dispatch riders, too, including women. Women drivers were used extensively. One of their most useful jobs was ferrying vehicles from the central depots to the fire forces. Many areas had training schools for women only. There were fitness training courses, very valuable to women who had to spend much of their time in the cramped surroundings of a control room. In country areas, the NFS took the training to the firemen. The systematic training of part-time firemen had been a problem, but the service found the solution. The traveling van with the expert instructor who could go around teaching different stations at weekends or in the evenings. Small rural stations were just as much part of the NFS as the large town brigades, and they had just the same keenness. When a fire call came, they would leave their homes or their work with all possible speed and by any available means. Many extremely efficient works brigades were affiliated to the NFS. And meanwhile, behind the scenes, the administrative machine got into its stride. Emergency water supplies was tackled urgently. Every possible source of water was surveyed, scheduled, and got ready for use. Access points to canals and lakes were prepared, the basements of bombed houses converted, EWS basins were installed in very large numbers throughout the streets. Steel tanks, concrete basins, and brick basins were built wherever there was space. Elsewhere, the service improvised or had a natural supply piped to a basin. The laying of overground piping was part of the same program. Firemen laid over 1,000 miles of it.
We had pumping stations set up to supply the emergency water system. On tidal rivers, they were erected on bridges to ensure a supply of water whatever the state of the tide. But emergency pipes could not be laid everywhere. The hose-laying lorry was the answer when there was a sudden call for a water relay to a large fire. The lorry paid out hose as it went and could provide twin lines for half a mile. If necessary, more than one lorry could be used. For the countryside, where water might be scarce, the mobile dam unit was put into service, a fire engine carrying its own water supply. There were other appliances as well, the escape carrying unit and the 60-foot hand-operated turntable ladder. This ladder was designed to meet the shortage of mechanically operated 100-foot ladders. New vehicles included canteen vans and mobile kitchens, many of them given by the people of Canada. The control van served as a mobile control point during operation. The wireless car, too. The mobile stores van supplied outlying stations with uniforms. The mobile workshop gave service on the spot to pumps and vehicles which needed running repairs. The mobile workshop, though, was only the outpost for the NFS major repair organization. Many men were employed on heavy repair work, testing and repairing all types of vehicles. Appliances were cleaned and resprayed for service. As the NFS expanded, new fire stations were built to replace the ones improvised in the early days of the war. Many firemen, some had been builders in civil life, worked on the sites and indeed built their own stations. So, the National Fire Service was organized. Before the war, the peacetime brigades were no more than 22,500 strong, 16,000 of them part-time men. By the outbreak of war, AFS volunteers had raised the figure to 210,000, a tenfold increase. Over 120,000 of them were part-timers. There were 13,000 women auxiliaries besides. The service which faced the Blitz of 1940-41 was only a little larger, but with the lessons of that winter in mind, the government decided that more men and women must be directed into the new National Fire Service. The NFS was at its strongest in 1942 and 1943, when it had 108,000 whole-time and 186,000 part-time men, a total of 294,000. In addition, there were 32,000 whole-time and 52,000 part-time women, making 84,000 women in the service. The overall strength of the NFS in Great Britain at this time exceeded 350,000.
Well, we settled down under the new management. Luckily, there was no repeat performance of the Blitz, but there were still some fires to keep us busy. All kinds of special jobs, too. For instance, we used to stand by while ships loaded and unloaded dangerous cargoes like munitions. We had to see that they took all the right safety precautions and watch out for the first sign of fire. Otherwise, there might have been a very nasty mess. It wasn't only the loading and unloading, though. Some of the chaps had a dangerous time fighting fires on board ships, sometimes at sea, sometimes in estuaries and docks, where one burnt-out ship might have held up the whole working of the port. And there were ordinary fires, too. Lull period fires, we called them. We were very strong on having as little damage as possible done by either fire or water, and we had special salvage squads to cover up and protect anything that might have got damaged. In the countryside, the NFS helped the farmer, bringing water to thirsty cattle, spraying the crops with insecticide. There were other kinds of special service jobs too. A sunken drifter might be blocking the harbour fairway. They sent for the NFS. A battery of trailer pumps would do the trick.
The enemy did not resume fire-raising attacks in force, but Britain did not go unscathed. In 1942, the Germans launched a series of vicious attacks against some of our most ancient cities, the so-called Baedeker raids. Exeter, Bath, Norwich, York, Canterbury, all towns whose local resources were not large. The mobilization of pumps and equipment tested the flexibility of the NFS organization. 175 pumps were mobilized for the raid on Bath, and over 250 for Exeter. Other appliances, water units, hose-laying lorries, field telephone vans, canteens, and mobile kitchens went with them. The stricken towns had the whole resources of the national organization to draw on. The Baedeker raids proved that the NFS setup worked.
The raids weren't big enough, though, to keep all of us busy. But we certainly weren't idle. Toys, for instance, they were very scarce during the war. Toy factories were making munitions for the soldiers, so fire stations made toys for the children. Some of the lads went in for art. A lot of firemen drew and painted pictures, of the Great Blitz mostly. They had an exhibition here, and then in Canada and the States. But I can talk better than paint. Discussion groups were more in my line. We made munitions, too. Some of the profits went towards improving things about the station and some to the NFS Benevolent Fund.
Things may have been quiet for the NFS in these years, but the invasion of Europe was coming shortly, and Britain was the main base. Filled with everything that was inflammable, a powder magazine. Fire was a threat to our success. The NFS fought blazes started not by Hitler, but by carelessness. War supplies were lost needlessly. The thing was serious, and the Fire Officers Committee launched a big propaganda campaign. D-Day came closer. The NFS stood by at the munitions factories, which were turning it out for 24 hours a day. And with the RAF, they learned the layout of vast ammunition dumps. At Bomber Command aerodromes, planes were going out daily to attack German war production centers. The NFS worked in close cooperation with the RAF, sometimes actually quartered on the drone and sharing the standby duties. The NFS worked too with the American air forces over here. The plan was figured out, and when an aircraft was in difficulties, the plan went into action. The carbon dioxide appliance moved off. The American firefighting section, the British firemen. Aircraft that crash usually burn. Time after time, the firemen were called to fires like this, to save the crew if they could. Anyway, to deal with the fire. A dangerous job when there's ammunition and bombs on board, and this is what it looked like after the night's work.
The NFS was assigned its part in the plan for the coming invasion. The fire defences of the south of England were to be strengthened to safeguard the Army's lines of communication and supply against the expected enemy retaliation. The Home Office Fire Staff worked out the plans for what was known as the Colour Scheme. They made a survey of NFS equipment and personnel in England and Wales. The North Country, the Midlands and Wales, the brown areas, were called on to give up part of their strength. And in these areas, the depleted service was reorganized. The extra men and extra pumps were sent to the blue areas, the east and south coasts. Here was deployed a concentration of fire services greater than ever before. So the NFS prepared for its part in D-Day. Convoys of pumps moved south. Thousands of men and women moved south, ready for the biggest single operation of the war. The NFS were reinforced by the Corps of Canadian Firefighters, a fine body of men, all of whom had volunteered for service here. We foresaw that firemen might be needed to go over to Europe. So, specially selected volunteers from England, Scotland and Wales were formed into 5 overseas colonies. The men trained under active service conditions. They learned the soldiers' art of camouflage and concealment. They toughened themselves up. They would be non-combatant, but ready to deal with casualties. The men were given special kit, with a beret instead of the familiar peaked cap. Miss Ellen Wilkinson inspected them while they were under training. Later, ready for service, one of the columns paraded in Hyde Park. We foresaw, too, a possible need for fireboats in the invasion port. 2 flotillas were formed with parent ships on the Thames. The NFS was ready for D-Day.
June 6, 1944, the British and American armies landed on the Normandy beaches. It was wonderful news, but we had expected the enemy to retaliate, and he did. Hitler's secret weapon, this. It was a new emergency, and it meant a new job for the NFS. Firemen spotters in observation posts watched for the fall of the flying bombs. They phoned Control Center, and the Civil Defense Rescue Squads rushed to the scene of the incident. Yes, in the civil defense jargon, they call them incidents. More and more V1. The Air Force and the gunners shot them down, but some still got through. The Civil Defense Services was superb, and the NFS played its part. Dealing with fires, that was their first task, but fires were only a small part of the damage. The main job was rescue, and the firemen helped the overworked rescue services. A turntable ladder could be used to reach and lower a casualty from an upper floor. Firemen cleared roads for traffic, tidied up blitzed hospitals, salvaged household goods, helped to evacuate women and children from the danger zones. The main fly bomb attack lasted 4 months. Then the Allied armies pushing into Europe overran the launching sites and supply dumps, and the attack was practically ended. But that wasn't all. After the V1, the V2, fired from the Reich itself. Throughout the winter of 1944, London was under fire once again.
During this grim attack, Number 4 Overseas Column was ordered to Europe to operate with the American 12th Army Group. The Deputy Chief of the Fire Staff saw them off at Tilbury, the first contingent of firemen ever to be sent to a foreign battleground.
Meanwhile, London's ordeal from rockets continued, and so did the work of the firemen. March 1945, we crossed the Rhine. We captured the rocket site. The war was nearly over.
We could now safely reduce the wartime strength of the NFS. Part-time firemen and firewomen in many parts of the country could be stood down. At a special parade in Hyde Park, Mr. Morrison voiced the country's appreciation of the work done by the part-time personnel. The women of the NFS had done a magnificent job. A gracious tribute was paid to them when Her Majesty the Queen, with Princess Elizabeth, came to Lambeth to review firewomen from all over the country. The Queen took the salute as the march passed. The Overseas Column returned from Europe. The commander of the American forces they were with had paid tribute to their splendid work. Sir Donald Somerville, then Home Secretary, welcomed them home at a special ceremony in Regent's Park.
June 1945, Hyde Park, the big stand-down parade, the King and Queen reviewing the civil defense workers. I was there on parade with the others and proud of it too. Looking back over those 6 years, we'd done our bit for victory. The women marched ahead of us. We followed. Men from all the fire forces from the Orkneys to Land's End, all marching proudly past. And after us, the pumps and trailers, ready spick and span. They hadn't always been so clean. Not at some of the fires I remember.
The war was over. Hundreds of surplus trailer pumps were sent away for disposal. The static water basins were removed. Steel piping went back into store. In stations up and down the land, men shook hands and went back to civil life. Wartime stations closed down.
But the peacetime job of the fire service goes on.
National Fire Service? Yes? What address? 21 Parkway? That's opposite the school, isn't it? Don't worry, they'll be on their way in a moment. 21 Parkway opposite the school. 21 Parkway opposite the school, right. 21 Parkway opposite the school.
This is London, 1940. This film will try to show you what happened to London during the autumn and winter of that year and the spring of 1941. What does London mean to you? Prim St. Martin's in the Fields? The shops in Regent Street? Or Ludgate Hill and St. Paul's Cathedral? Big Ben, perhaps? Or Buckingham Palace and St. James's Park? Or do you think of Whitehall and Downing Street, home of the Prime Minister? The Cenotaph and Westminster Abbey? Or does London mean people to you? 10 million people, going to work, putting up with things, turning out the weapons of war. But to Adolf Hitler in the autumn of 1940, London meant none of these things. London meant only the greatest port in the world, a bomb aimer's dream. London was within easy range of the German airfields in northern France. The great oil storage tanks along the banks of the Thames estuary were among the first targets of the Luftwaffe. The Germans were certain that they could destroy London, capital and seat of government of the only nation ranged against them by the summer of 1940. So at first, the bombers came impudently, in daylight. But presently, thanks to the RAF and Britain's Ack-Ack gunners, they took to coming over at night. I remember the evening of Sunday, December 29th. It was just like any other winter evening. The only remarkable thing about it was that the tide in the Thames was very low. That's a thing to remember for later. The first bombers were over London at about 6:30. Soon the fires hissed from the top-story windows. Soon the streets were noisy with shouting and fire engines. That night there was a strong wind, and it whipped the fire from building to building in the narrow streets of the city. London's firemen fought the fires like soldiers fighting in battle, stubbornly but with common sense. They yielded where they had to yield, street by street, block by block. Within a few hours, whole districts were afire. But at headquarters, London's fire chiefs were planning a counterattack. They knew that the scale of the fires was so great that they could not hope to put out individual fires one by one. All told, there were 1,500 fires that night, including half a square mile of flames in the Moorgate area. The fire chiefs planned, therefore, to surround the burning areas and to prevent the fires from spreading to other parts of London. What ammunition is to a soldier, water is to a fireman. And the water supply from the mains was cut by bombs and failing. There remained only the river, but remember that the tide was very low that night. In certain tables you can look up the level of the tide at London Bridge, and of course the Germans had looked it up. So when the pressure from the water mains fell to a mere dribble, water had to be found from elsewhere. At headquarters, men and women were busy organizing a new supply of water from the Thames. But the job was difficult and slow. Meanwhile, the fires spread and spread. The firefighters had to give ground. Back in the control room, the work went on. Overhead, some of the German bombers were back on their second trip. At the same time, reinforcements were sent in from other regions surrounding London. About 280 new pumps were rushed in. Some came from as far away as 60 miles. from places like Oxford, Cambridge, Chelmsford, and Hartford, and others from Reading and Windsor in southern England. But now the fireboats were speeding up the river. On the slippery mud, firemen struggled to race the new lines up to the bank. Now the first were dragged up and connected. The water from the Thames was being boosted from point to point. Water on. Once more, the firemen were fighting back. A large number of them were part-time volunteers. That is, they worked in factories and offices by day and fought as firemen by night. Wardens and civil defense workers also did courageous work. Thanks to their heroic efforts, the burning flood was halted. Hitler once boasted, "I will rub out their cities." This is what he meant. "48 hours after the beginning of the raid, all but a dozen fires in the city and a few south of the Thames were under control. By now, it was possible to measure the extent of the damage. In the city area, water, gas, and telephone services were severely cut, and business premises suffered badly. 5 railway stations and 16 underground stations had to be temporarily closed. Several docks were put out of action, and many warehouses containing foodstuffs were burnt down. Burnt-out fire engines and pumps lay in the city streets. But the Luftwaffe had paid a price. The twisted remnants of shot-down German planes were also among the ruins. All around, firemen were packing up. Some had been on the job for 48 hours. Some had died. Many had no homes to go to. But as part of the measures taken to defend London and its people against German air attacks, rest centers were available for all the homeless. Here, shelter and food were provided. All through the winter of 1940 and the spring of 1941, the Germans kept at it. The great city took a tremendous battering. Hundreds upon hundreds of its buildings were destroyed by fire. But in offices and in the factories, Londoners turned up for work as usual. Shall not burn. The strictest measures were taken to improve Britain's defenses against fire. Static water tanks were set up by the thousand. Night fighter forces were strengthened. More anti-aircraft guns. The observer corps was expanded. Plans were made for making fire watching compulsory. No more empty buildings at night. On the night of May 10th, 1941, the Germans made their last great fire attack on London. While London's guns roared, the people sought shelter in the tubes and elsewhere. These were the people the Germans tried to terrorize into surrender. Outside, the fires were spreading. This raid lasted only 5 hours, but more than 2,000 fires were reported that night. Great damage was done in the docks, and railway and road communication suffered badly. Many of London's fine historic buildings were destroyed. St. Clement Danes, St. Stephen Walbrook, St. Mary Le Bow were gutted. Many halls of the ancient livery companies were burnt down. The Royal Mint, the London Museum, Westminster Abbey, the Guildhall Art Library were damaged. Remember one of the Nazi gang who said, "Whenever I hear the word culture, I draw my revolver." The men and women who fought fires in London that night risked their lives to save what they could. This film is a reminder of the suffering and sacrifice, not only of the people of London, but of all those other places that were bombed and burnt. Plymouth, Coventry, Bristol, Warsaw, Rotterdam, Belgrade, Leningrad, and 100 more. London was tested by fire and high explosive. The great city beside the Thames was saved by the people who live there. They have cause for pride, for they did not flinch, and in adversity, they were great.
In August 1941, the National Fire Service was formed to put firefighting on a national basis. This arrangement enabled every firefighting unit in England and Wales to be brought under one control and made possible a countrywide mobilizing scheme embracing the several thousand appliances available. For all civil defense purposes, the country is divided into regions. There are 12 of these. Scotland is number 11. In each region, there's a regional fire control, here marked R. The region is divided into fire forces, each with a fire force control. The fire forces are divided into divisions with divisional controls. In large cities with a number of divisions, one control becomes the chief divisional control. The divisions in turn comprise a number of subdivisions. Each subdivision controls a varying number of stations. Thus, the whole country is closely linked through its different controls: station, subdivision, division, fire force, region, and finally the Home Office Fire Control Room in London. When you look at the whole country like this, it appears complicated, but it's based on a simple chain of control. First there's the station, then the subdivision controlling several stations. Next comes the division, controlling several subdivisions with their stations. Above that is the fire force, controlling several divisions, and itself coming under the regional fire control, together with other fire forces in the region. At the top of the chain comes the Home Office Fire Control Room, directing every region in the country. Through this chain of control, every NFS appliance can be mobilized to deal with an emergency no matter where it may arise. Now this is the boundary line of an imaginary region. We'll call it 15, with 3 fire forces. And here are its other controls and stations. There's been a serious raid in this region in 2 places, both in 49 Fire Force. A serious fire situation has developed, and all nearby pumps have been called out. Those from neighboring stations in other subdivisions are also in attendance, and other divisions are sending pumps in, both to the fires and to stand by in case they're required. Help is coming in from an adjoining fire force to build up the strength of the depleted stations. Let's go back to the beginning and follow this mobilization through step by step from the first fire calls.
There's a fire at Jones's warehouse.
Jones's warehouse, what address?
11 Ferry Lane.
11 Ferry Lane?
Off the High Street.
Off High Street, right.
Send Y3. Where's the job?
Y Street to Jones's warehouse, Ferry Lane.
Jones's warehouse, Ferry Lane, right. Y3.
And so the first attendance to Ferry Lane is ordered from Y Station. The station reports every movement to the control above, the subdivision.
From Y Station, fire at 11 Ferry Lane, off High Street. Major pump sent.
Fire at 11 Ferry Lane, off High Street. Major pump sent.
Correct.
Control room work at a normal station can be handled under air raid conditions by 2 firewomen. One deals with all messages and keeps the occurrence book. The other acts as mobilizing officer, sending out appliances and keeping the board up to date. Each fire must be shown on the board with a tally recording the attendance. Y Station is now attending 2 other fires as well as the job at Ferry Lane, and pumps 1, 2 and 3 are out. This looks like being a busy night, and the attendances will soon have to be increased.
Message from Jones's warehouse. They want the pumps made up to 5 and a turntable ladder.
Number 4 has gone out in the meantime, so the station is left with only one pump.
10-5, all subdivisions for 3 more pumps and TL. Right.
Y station orders on its remaining pump and passes the message up to the subdivision.
From Y station, 5 pump fire at 11 Furry Lane, off High Street. 3 pumps.
Station to subdivision. The subdivisional staff consists on an average of 4 telephonists, in addition to the mobilizing officer, an assistant and a board operator.
1 major pump from X to a fire at Stillwell Street.
The subdivisional mobilizing board shows the disposition of appliances at each station. There are 6 stations shown here in subdivision 2, with a total of 8 pumps still available. "21 fires, practically all one-pump fires, are being attended. If necessary, the subdivisional mobilizing officer can order appliances from any station in the subdivision to the help of any other station.
Message from Y.
11 Ferry Lane, now 5 pump fire. 3 major pumps and TL required.
From its other stations, the subdivision is able to supply the other 3 pumps and turntable ladder for Ferry Lane.
Send 2 major pumps from U, 1 major pump from X, and TL from Z.
The board is immediately adjusted and the orders are written out for transmission to the stations concerned.
Secondary control been informed?
They're being informed now.
Right.
On and above the subdivisional level, there is a secondary control for every control, keeping a board identical with the primary control.
And turntable ladder from Z to fire at 11 Ferry Lane.
Secondary control can immediately take over mobilizing if the primary control is put out of action.
Pump from X and TL from Z.
As well as reporting them to secondary control, all movements are reported to the divisional control.
We'll send a situation report to the division.
Right.
Attending 21 fires, 5 pump fire at Ferry Lane, 1 TL sent. Pumps available, 4 major.
Subdivision to division.
A3 attending 6 fires. A4, message from the fire at Market Hill. Water unit required.
A3's water unit.
A2 attending 21 fires, 5 pump fire with TL at Ferry Lane.
The divisional mobilizing board summarizes the appliances available in each subdivision and gives the totals for the division. This is Division A, with 4 subdivisions. The chalk figures show a total of 58 pumps available in the division. The board has a section for each subdivision showing the number of fires being attended and the address of fires with an attendance of 5 pumps or more, in addition to fires at vital points. Ferry Lane has just been put up as a 5-pump fire, and the situation tallies with the subdivisional board, recording a total of 21 fires. Subdivision 1, on the left, is attending 7 fires. Subdivision 3, 6 fires, and Subdivision 4, 16 fires, including 2 5-pump fires requiring special appliances. According to the divisional board, the situation is serious, particularly in Subdivisions 2 and 4, and shows every sign of getting worse. Divisional control should be housed in 2 rooms where possible. This isolates the mobilizing staff from the noise of the telephones. The telephonists are in a separate room with the message supervisor. The divisional mobilizing officer has 2 assistants. One receives all incoming messages, passing on to the mobilizing officer those requiring his attention.
1,000 feet of hose required.
Stores officer.
The second assistant controls all outgoing messages. There's also a board operator. The divisional mobilizing officer has control of all pumps and special appliances in the division, and he must move these in to reinforce the heavily raided subdivisions.
A2, fire at 11 Ferry Lane, now 20 pump fire. 5 pumps and 1 TL sent, 15 pumps and ET required.
Right, send 10 pumps from A1, 5 pumps and ET from A3.
Instead of 125, there are only 40 pumps still available in the division. This move will reduce them still further. As soon as the number of pumps drops below, say, 50%, the mobilizing officer must ask for reinforcements. Here, he's let his number fall rather low.
Ask Fire Force Control for 50 pumps to report to the reinforcement base, Oliver Road.
Division to Fire Force.
A Division got 56 fires.
That's Borotown.
Yes. They've a 20-pump job at Ferry Lane and they want 50 reinforcing pumps.
At Oliver Road reinforcement base?
Yes. Send them 20 from B, 20 from C, and 10 from D.
20 from B, 20 from C, and 10 from D.
Right.
And so more pumps are called in to reinforce the heavily raided areas. From 49 Fire Force, the message has gone to the other divisions and down their chain of control to the stations. From rural stations and from small towns, pumps turn out, singly and in groups. Officers are also called in as reinforcements. The appliances report to the reinforcement base of the town to which they've been ordered. Pumps at a reinforcement base are handled by the senior control in the town, which in this case is Division A. The 50 appliances at the base are shown by the square tallies on the board.
Send 20 reinforcement pumps to A2 and 10 to A4.
The divisional mobilizing officer allocates these pumps to the affected subdivisions, who in turn will disperse them to stations or send them direct to fires. This order is sent to the reinforcement base and the appliances are redirected to their destinations. On the Fire Force mobilizing board, the totals of pumps available in each division must be adjusted to include the reinforcing pumps. There's now a total of 66 pumps available in 49 Fire Force. A survey of the position shows that Division A is fighting 83 fires. Division B has no fires. There's 1 fire in Division C and 53 fires in Division D. These figures change continually as messages come in from the divisions.
A Division. 1,000 feet of 2.5 rubber line. Send that to area stores.
Area stores.
Like the division, the Fire Force Control should, if possible, have a separate message room.
Yes. Yes. Would you repeat that, please? Yes. Messenger? Assisting the Fire Force Division Officer.
Incoming and outgoing messages are checked by the message supervisor.
Repeat that. Mobilizing officer.
The Fire Force Control must be prepared at all times to meet calls for assistance from the divisions. And the mobilizing officer must try to anticipate requirements. The mobilizing board confirms that the situation is getting more serious. There are now only 53 pumps available, and all the reinforcing pumps have been absorbed.
A's got to that last batch pretty quickly.
G's getting low again, too.
Get onto region and ask for 50 reinforcing pumps.
Fire Force to region. The Regional Fire Control has a broad picture of the general situation and is dealing in large numbers of pumps. The mobilizing officer, therefore, has the opportunity to anticipate developments and to send reinforcements where they are needed. To enable demands from fire forces to be promptly met, calls for assistance should be made in good time, bearing in mind the distances the reinforcements may have to travel.
Due to Unit B, stop. Diversion across roads via Green Hill to High Street, stop. End of message, time of origin, O2 order. Major, 20. End of message, time of origin, O2,
In this case, a request for assistance from 49 Fire Force has come in before the regional mobilizing officer has taken any action.
From 49 Fire Force.
They want 50 pumps.
The board shows 51 fire forces having the largest number of pumps available.
We'll send them in from 51. You take a message to 51 Fire Force. Send 50 pumps to Fire Force 49 reinforcement bases. 20 to A Division. 10 to B Division. 10 to C Division. 10 to D Division. Stop. Column officer to report to A Division reinforcement base. End of message.
Here, once again, is the situation in number 15 region. So far, we've seen the whole network of mobilizing in action, up to the point where regional control sends pumps in from 51 Fire Force to stand by in 49. But now the situation becomes still worse, and more reinforcements will have to be brought into the region. Appliances are sent from one region into another on instructions from the Home Office Fire Control Room. The Fire Control Room has no mobilizing board. The whole situation is represented on this map by tallies in different combinations. The large square tallies show the number of major appliances manned and available in each fire force. The smaller, colored tallies of different shapes show movements of pumps between the regions. Here is the final situation, with reinforcements coming in from adjoining regions. Had the fires been close to the boundary, pumps would have been called in from other regions at a much earlier stage. It's always the principle to dispatch first those pumps which will arrive soonest, irrespective of boundaries. This is the general picture of the mobilizing scheme as it operates throughout the country. Every station is vital to it, and success depends on the individual efficiency of every man and woman in the control rooms. Good mobilizing procedure and drill are essential if a heavy incendiary attack is to be successfully fought.